Welcome to this short video on the bullwhip effect and the root beer game. In this presentation, we're going to try to explain to you what the bullwhip effect is and how it can be simulated in a little activity known as the root beer game. This video is primarily intended for online students because in the online classroom environment, the asynchronous classroom environment, it's very difficult to play the root beer game. And so I'm going to try to give you, as best I can, a feel for what participants will experience in the root beer game and how it relates to the bullwhip effect and supply chain management. What is the bullwhip effect? The bullwhip effect is the phenomenon that occurs when small changes in product demand by the consumer at the front of the supply chain translate into wider and wider swings in demand experienced by companies further upstream in the supply chain. As you can see here, consumer demand, denoted by what is seen in the retailer graph, shows a little uptick in demand, and in response to that demand, the upstream suppliers will see wider and wider swings in demand. Again, this is what the bullwhip effect looks like. Now, the root beer game, what is it? It is an exercise really in frustration that teaches about the bullwhip effect. It's a fun game and it's really designed to have students fail at managing their inventory well. In the root beer game, participants are assigned to 4 roles and place orders for root beer with their supplier in order to meet their customers' demand. Those roles are retailer, wholesaler, distributor, and factory. Consumer demand at the front of the supply chain is computer generated, and the objective of this game is to minimize cost. There is a $1 per week per unit of back order. That is the cost for back orders, and there is a 50-cent per unit per week inventory holding cost. And so as you can see, the cost of being short or running out of inventory is double the cost of having too much inventory. So the incentive is clearly to have enough inventory to satisfy your customers' demands. As I mentioned, the game is really designed to frustrate participants and simulate the bullwhip effect. Participants do not know who is on his or her team. There is no talking during the game. There is no visibility of consumer demand except for the retailer, the person playing the retailer role, and on their computer screen they will receive orders from the consumer. Again, these are computer generated orders. There's also a 2-week order delay, meaning when the consumer places the order, it's 2 weeks before the retailer will see it, and likewise 2 weeks before the wholesaler will see orders placed by the retailer, and so forth all the way up the supply chain. Not only is there an order delay, there is a 2-week shipping delay. So let's say that a distributor has inventory that it can ship to the wholesaler. Well, there's a 2-week distribution or shipping delay, and so it takes 2 weeks before the inventory is received at the wholesaler. Also, the game starts with low levels of inventory. Again, all of these things are designed to simulate the bullwhip effect within this environment. As the game starts, consumer demand is constant for a few simulated weeks, and then it doubles. And this triggers a fear of back orders within the retailer. After the retailer sees this demand double, they will typically increase orders to the wholesaler, who then falls behind and increases orders to the distributor, who likewise increases orders to the factory. Each participant racks up back order costs, and these shortages are exacerbated by the long lead times. Panic sets in, and then there's an explosion of orders all the way up the supply chain, and those orders far exceed the actual demand of the consumer. In response, the factory cranks up production, and after several simulated weeks, a glut of inventory appears and moves down the supply chain toward the retailer. Inventory holding costs explode, and participants are helpless to stop this explosion before it's too late. After much frustration and exasperation and hair pulling, the game ends. This is the experience that participants will have when they play the root beer game. Again, it is designed to simulate the bullwhip effect, where demand fluctuations increase as we move upstream, and then a glut of inventory appears and it moves back downstream, and everyone is flush with inventory at the end of the game. During the beginning and intermediate part of the game, the back order costs are very high, again $1 per unit of back order, and then at the end of the game, the inventory holding costs are very high, 50 cents per unit per week. In a typical root beer game, the costs will be as displayed in this graph. The retailer will have the lowest cost, and then the wholesaler, distributor, and factory. So the further upstream we go with the supply chain, the higher the costs. Now, this is a real phenomenon, and in fact, this study done in 1999 shows how the bullwhip effect appears in the apparel industry. As it says here, the orders from the customer to the retailer fluctuate up or down by about 5%. Going back one level in the supply chain, orders to the garment maker typically fluctuate plus or minus 10% and so forth, all the way up or down 40% to the yarn maker. So again, the bullwhip effect is a real phenomenon that occurs in supply chains. Now, what can you do to fight the bullwhip effect? There's a number of things that can be done. Probably the best way to fight the bullwhip effect is to have all companies in the supply chain share demand information. In the root beer game, the wholesaler, distributor, and factory were unable to see what the consumer was ordering from the retailer. But if the retailer is able to share that information, that demand information, with its upstream supply chain partners, then those partners can more proactively plan to meet demand without building up an excess of inventory. As it says here, it's best that this data, this demand data, is based on point of sale data. Walmart, for example, does this very well, where they are able to roll up the demand from their stores and pass it on to their key suppliers. Another practice of Walmart is what's called EDLP, everyday low price. And this encourages level demand from consumers versus lumpy demand in response to discounts and promotions. And if a company is going to engage in promotions and sales and so forth, then it's critical that they partner with their production and supply chain personnel and even their upstream suppliers to make sure that there's coordination to anticipate those increases in demand that come in response to those promotions. Another practice that helps mitigate the effects of the bullwhip effect or prevent the bullwhip effect is to produce in small batches. This way, a producer can change from one product to another quickly and thereby better respond to changes in demand. Another practice is to break the dependence on end-of-period incentives to make numbers. These incentives, for example, quarter-end or month-end incentives given to a sales force, encourage artificial sales that stuff distribution channels with excess inventory that then must be worked down in a future period. Finally, when there is a chronic shortage within an industry, there can be what is called short gaming, where customers will over-order. In other words, they'll order in excess of what the actual demand is in order to get a larger portion of the limited supply. Again, this is called short gaming, and in order to prevent this from happening, producers can ration their limited supply or allocate it according to customers' historical demand. This way it prevents customers from gaining an advantage by short gaming. Well, that's really it for our little presentation here. We have talked again about the bullwhip effect and the root beer game, a little exercise that helps participants experience in a fun and frustrating environment what the bullwhip effect is. And again, just to highlight, the bullwhip effect is a real phenomenon that will occur at different times in different supply chains. And so as an operations professional or even as a business professional, whether you work in marketing or finance, this is a good concept to understand.